home within the main settlement, which would have a big impact upon those women making the decision to look after that child and making a decision together. There's a much more serious concern, though, that was probably at the front of their heads too, that look, both those women had lost children of their own. So Charlotte Brea, she was lucky she only lost one of the 12 she gave birth. That should give you an idea of how genuinely affluent that family was. Mrs Burrows, she's got 2 of her own children buried not too far away from Anne Gibbons. So if you come this way, folks, you can kind of make out there's a chest fold over there with an urn on top of it. Yeah, that's not a child's grave, they don't get any fancy chest folds. There's a little headstone just in front of that. That's one of Burrows' children, there's one that's behind. So you can see we've gone back to being depressing, that's pretty important. Let's talk about more children that pass away. You've got John Thomas Staveley's grave there, the one with the 3 peaks on. And when I was a kid, they'd tell me lots of things about convicts. They'd tell me about how convicts aren't just buried on the low southern side in unmarked graves. They'd tell me about how convicts had to be buried on top of each other and fit them all in. They even bury them upright. Made a lot of sense to me when I was a child, but I found out since they lied to me a lot when I was a kid, and you can see what a mess up I am as a result, can't you? Apparently it's not that small an island, it's an area of about 2 acres, so potentially you could fit about 2,000 bodies on a parcel of land that size. That's taking into account that it's rocky around the outside. That's not discounting there could be an element of overlap, but actually that's not uncommon in a cemetery today, really, if you're getting a whole burial, this thing there. So it's not a callousness to it or anything like that. The irony is the only combined graves that we are positive about belong to the free population. You can see John Thomas Staveley died at 2.5 years old, fell down a well. Of course that's a tragedy for him. And he would have had a really poignant poem underneath his grave. But you can see what happens, his siblings have ruined it for him, haven't they? So Julia passes away and so does George. And you can see the family have cut back at the stone so they can actually combine them in death. The poem that's there simply says, now, the Lord giveth and the Lord hath taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. So you can imagine how tested that family's faith is, can't you? And look, I hope you can see the free side of the island might be the pretty side, but it's the depressing section, isn't it? Don't worry. When I tell you about convicts, it's a lot more exciting. In fact, there's some to even talk about over here too.
Are the bodies still buried here, or have they been exhumed?
Oh no, they're still here.
They're still here.
And so when it comes to talking about how people are buried, it'd be great if we did exhume a heck of a lot of it, right? There's a lot of questions that aren't really answered here. In terms of how many people are buried here, there's at least 1,300. There potentially could be more. We are missing a Catholic death register. And then, look, there would have been other denominations as well, besides just Wesley and Anglican too. So if you knew where it was, you'd send it to us. So the chances are there are more buried here than that minimum estimate. And the only way to find out is to really do a bit of rummaging around, right? The only way to find out and be sure there aren't combined burials is to do rummaging around. But community groups have been particularly against that, and that's okay, I suppose. You know, it's a sacred space. We even have plans to redevelop the actual pathways, in fact, so you will actually be above the ground and not walking on anybody. In fact, you'll be doing that as you go down. In fact, if you come this way, there are a number of convict headstones to tell you about also. So, look, the Reverend Manton, he's the guy that said the convicts should be placed in unmarked graves. His attitude was that they had been sinners and don't deserve to be death. And that might be appropriately considered. At that point, Port Arthur was exclusively a secondary punishment station for those men who misbehaved after already being transformed. By about the 1850s, though, Port Arthur's not just a punishment station, it's also a welfare depot, a place where they look after not just serving convicts, but ex-convicts, people classified as paupers, invalids and lunatics. And the paupers here, well, I'd like to think that you think the paupers here, not because they're a sinner, but because they're poor. You can understand how they just totally disregard the Reverend Manton's rulings at that point, which is always good to see, isn't it? It's just a bit. And at that point, they then can put in memorial stones for convicts. In fact, we assume there would have been lots of wooden memorials that have since disappeared over time. In fact, you've got Patrick Howard's grave on the far left, I think, there's a cross on top of it. He dies at the age of 82. So he's a really good example of the demographics that are here at the very end of Port Arthur's operation, how it does resemble more of an old folks' home than a maximum security prison in an industrial town. Michael Roach hints at the hard labour of an earlier time, though. He died because a tree fell on top of him. William Mansfield, on the far right, closest to us now, he died of tuberculosis. But there's more to the story than that. Look, he's one of these gentlemen that had privileges in life most of the other convicts never did. We know that he came from a privileged background because Mansfield happened to steal 2 waistcoats, a gold watch and a handkerchief from nobody else but his father. He obviously thought they looked much better than him. They didn't. His old man. Don't borrow anything from your dad. Well, look, Dad maybe decided to get the local police around, perhaps just to put the fear of God into his son. I mean, we don't really know that. That's the problem. All we do know is that he is transported for 7 years and informed on by his own father. Somewhere along the line, Mansfield happened to meet as Thomas Pickering, and Thomas was originally transported for burglary. They don't bite, you can see that.
It's all right, mate. It's all right. I'm with you, buddy.
Yeah. You can see it was crawling over my hand earlier. It should be fine. Pickering happened, well, look, he was a burglar, that's what he was transported for, and he never really got out of the habit. So both he and Mansfield, they were responsible for breaking the home of a very wealthy individual in a town north of Hobart, New Norfolk. For that, they ended up in a lot of trouble together. So they spent time at Norfolk Island, which was a jail contemporaneous with Port Arthur, but kind of the reason why you'd behave yourself at Port Arthur is because you didn't really want to go there. So a bit worse. And when that closed down, they ended up spending time here at Port Arthur together too. When Mansfield passed away, you can see somebody has put in a real expense for the stones. And I'd like to think it's a really regretful father. You understand, I don't know that at all, do I? It's just more possession of the guy. What we do know, fortunately, is that Pickering has put a lot of his own time and effort into the stone as well. And you can see that's at the bottom of the stone there. So, see Pickering? Thomas happened to learn monumental stone masonry through his time within the prison system. In fact, he's responsible for some of the other stones here on the island of the dead and some at Norfolk Island as well. That rope border seems to be his trademark piece. You can imagine it would be a real privilege to put up an epitaph for your friend like that.
Yeah.
And even the poem, if you read it, it asks the question, why do we mourn departed friends or shake their salams? There's a voice that Jesus sends to call us to his arms. So it's got all that obligatory stuff about religion, redemption. It's also about friendship too. Some guides have gone to the extent of saying maybe these two gentlemen could have been very close friends. And you're not there for any reason. But you know, these guys, they're tourists, it's just all no idea. I'd like to tell you that not just dead people out here, but two men that lived out in the island. General theme to all the stories I'm telling you about, that there's a lot of guiding conjecture in there, isn't there? You can see. And that's partly because of the nature of what we're talking about. It's not just facts, places, it's about people. So I don't know why you're here this morning. How am I going to know what these guys are doing? It's only sort of a piece of guesswork, really. But that's fun. I mean, that's the joy of history. It's all up for revision. Do you remember, and talking about revision, do you remember this photo?
Yeah.
Did you notice the little hut in the photo? Oh, you noticed it? Oh, that's good. I'm sure you all did, folks. You know. The photo's sort of taken from a bit behind us over there because you've got Point 4 in the background, and in the corner there's a little hut. So the little hut would have just been behind that bushier shrub you can sort of see there. And again, you probably also noticed too on the flip side, there's a photo of what the hut used to, well, what it did look like. Take a look at that, and you guys have a chance to think through it. This was the home of the resident gravedigger, and the gravedigger was another convict from the main settlement. There was actually no call really in having a resident gravedigger out here at all. In fact, they only had gravediggers here for a period of, what was it? It's about 11 and a half years here. So for most of Port Arthur's operation, in fact, times when most people are dying, there's nobody out here at all digging holes. And you can understand why. You could have always had somebody brought in from the main settlement to dig a couple of holes when required. It served a different purpose, kept this person away from what's happening with the main settlement. So the first gravedigger out here, John Barons, he was originally transported for burglary, never really got out of the habit though. But his real problem was that he was charged for the sexual assault of a minor. So that's why he ends up in this secondary punishment station, and they thought if they put him out here, he should be sacked, right? And that's 10 years, he wouldn't have survived otherwise, so you can sort of see, can't you?
Yeah.
The next and last gravedigger was a man called Mark Jeffrey, and he's out here for an entirely different reason. Mark was referred to as Big Mark within the prison system. It doesn't actually mean he was that tall, he was only measured at 5 foot 11 and a half inches. But you can understand in the context, that means he's a good head and shoulders taller than most other convicts and guards as well. He used to make a living as a boxer for some time before eventually he too was transported for burglary. And he's not the sort of person to tell other people, well, be told what to do. He tells other people where to go. This is the problem. To give you an idea of how intimidating Mark was, it was while he was spending time at Norfolk Island, that I was telling you about earlier. that he had to dispute with another convict over just something. Well, it was food, really. It was really minor sort of stuff. But he told that man he was going to kill that man, and guess what happened? No, that person just died on the spot.
Oh, oh wow.
So he didn't kill that man. He was still charged for manslaughter in the event, though. But for whatever reason, that person just, dropped dead. And so that's the sort of person we're talking about. They thought they put him out here on the island. He shouldn't get into any trouble at all. It seemed like a really clever idea. But Mark's not the sort of person just to be told what to do. He demands to have something. He's a bargain. He demands to attend divine service on Sunday morning. And that's a clever trick. Because even if he's not that religiously inclined, they're not going to deny him this opportunity. So that meant every Saturday afternoon a boat would come out to collect him so he can spend a Saturday night in the penitentiary. What a night on the town, what do you reckon? On a Sunday afternoon they would drop him off. We don't think he did start a trouble out here, because he was often seen on the rocks fishing for crayfish, southern rock lobster. He kept chickens on the island, grew cabbages as well. What the fertiliser was, we can sort of only guess. What happens if you catch too many crayfish? You can't eat them all yourself. We never caught him out. This conjecture, but we're highly suspicious. Even look, he's using it for his own benefit as well too. You can see this is a man who continually breaks all the rules, and as a result, he actually ends up with a really comfortable job. One where there's no one telling him what to do, right? One where he gets his own little flash, and there's a chance that he might have been profiting out of the whole situation as well. So look, he was doing very well for himself, and you can see this would. Well, in fact, there were a number of visitors that said this was the best job you could ever get here. Visitors during the period. They had a chance to meet Mark and John Barons. There's no boss telling you what to do. The labour itself is not particularly difficult. You only have to keep a hole in the ground open for somebody who needs it. In fact, John Barons, he doubled his workload. He was so bored. He kept 2 holes in the ground open. One for a Catholic, one for a Protestant. He must have thought the difference was pretty important. But there are downsides being out here, of course, too. The company don't talk back. If they did, you'd kind of be worried, wouldn't you? And you're constantly reminded by your own mortality as well. And that seemed to affect even individuals like Mr. Jeffries, Mark. So he would apparently tend a hole in the ground that he thought one day he was going to be buried in, and unfortunately never was. But apparently it smoothed the sides of that grave each day, so that he's not obsessed or anything. And he's paranoid about having his body eaten by worms, so anything he saw wriggling in the ground, he'd cut in 2 with a shovel. We know that only makes 2 worms, doesn't it? Scientific fact, isn't it? So, after spending a year and a half out here, a signal fire was lit in the middle of the night. That's his equivalent to a distress beacon. A boat comes out to collect him. They find him up to his neck in the water, and obviously quite distraught. They take him back to the main settlement, and there he said he saw the back of his hut glow and had a vision by his satanic majesty. So he thought he'd seen the devil. And at that, look, you've got to understand, a guide couldn't just not come up with all manner of conjecture about that, could you? He couldn't hold us back. Maybe it's our first ghost story here at Port Arthur. Maybe it did send him crazy. The other theory, which is absolutely improbable, but look, it doesn't stop you. But if you're going to exchange crayfish for anything, you probably want something very good in return. And you can imagine people would take liberties with that. So look, this place does, give us more questions and answers, I suppose. What I'd like to do is take you down to where there's some park benches, so you can sit